This is our fourth and final panel on building resilience in metropolitan areas. And before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to point to the drawings and maps in the back that were created by Kelvin Vu and Priyanjali Sinha. So thank you for that. I hope, wonderful research associates. So after this is all over, I hope that you can look at those as well as the map that Ben Volks brought as well. I'd also like to recognize Clara Sophia Gust. Is Clara Sophia here? She is not here at this moment, but she is a event manager for this, and she has been absolutely wonderful, and it wouldn't happen if it wasn't for her. As well as our social media team, Ankita Nagwekar and Kulan Enkbold. Thank you both. As well as all of the other student volunteers. Thank you. I'd like to bring Rodrigo Victor to the stage. He is a forest engineer from the University of Sao Paulo since 1996 in the Sao Paulo State Environment Department. He has been executive coordinator of the Sao Paulo City Greenbelt Biosphere Reserve, director general of the Sao Paulo State Forest Institute, regional director for protected areas management at the Sao Paulo State Forest Foundation, among others. His main areas are land planning for ecosystem conservation and sustainable use, protected areas designation and management, urban and peri-urban ecosystem planning and management, social environmental projects coordination, ecosystem service assessment for human well-being. He led several interdisciplinary projects and teams and participated in the UNESCO and SCOPE working groups for city sustainable management and research. In the framework of the Millennial Ecosystem Assessment, he coordinated the Sao Paulo Greenbelt Subglobal Assessment and is one of the editors of the book, it's in Portuguese, I can't pronounce it, but you will, the Ecosystem Services and Human Wellbeing and the Sao Paulo City Greenbelt Biosphere in 2020. Victor is now collaborating with the Biota Synthesis Center, designed to provide local policy makers with sound scientific information on nature-based solutions to respond to climate change, ecosystem conservation, and human life quality issues. He is currently the technical assistant at the Sao Paulo State Forest Foundation. Please welcome Rodrigo Victor.
Well, thank you, Rob, and I thank the organizers for inviting me and letting me be a witness of this magnificent event with so many excellent cases to tell. Well, I will talk about the Greenbelt of São Paulo and the issues involved in it, including restoration, ecosystem services, water, agriculture. This is the vision of the Greenbelt of São Paulo. The big metropolis with around 20 million people and a huge surrounding Greenbelt, which is majorly composed by native vegetation, more specifically forest ecosystems, but it also has agricultural areas, urban and peri-urban agricultural areas, water reservoirs, a lot of infrastructure for the city's development. The Greenbelt is just a very close area to all what is happening to the city dynamics. Well, here you can see the limits of the city of São Paulo, the São Paulo metro area, and in a wider boundary, the Biosphere Reserve itself, the São Paulo City Greenbelt Biosphere Reserve, which was designated in 1994. Some figures about all this area. The whole biosphere reserve with its terrestrial and marine areas is 2.3 million hectares. It encompasses a whole population of 25.4 million inhabitants, which are entirely two metro areas, São Paulo and Santos metro areas. That's 12.5% of Brazilian population in an area producing nearly 20% of the national GDP in 78 municipalities. So it's a context of mega diversity, mega economy, and mega population all living together and thriving to exist. Just some historical background on the designation of the Biosphere Reserve. The Biosphere Reserve arose from a grassroots movement by the end of the 80s, a movement that was opposing to a ring road, a big ring road crossing all sensitive areas in the Greenbelt, water areas, biodiversity areas, and there was a very popular movement which collected nearly 150,000 signatures, which you may believe for the pre-internet era, this was a lot. You had to go to people and make them sign every sheet of paper themselves. It was a big popular movement in Brazil by the time, and that led to the designation of the São Paulo City Greenbelt Biosphere Reserve. To those of you who are not familiar with the concept of Biosphere Reserve, Biosphere Reserves are defined by UNESCO as learning sites for sustainable development. So they are like living laboratories where we conserve, where we put in place economic activities, and where we become a platform for research, environmental education, monitoring. A Biosphere Reserve does all this. Nowadays, we have 748 biosphere reserves in the world, in 134 countries. In every side of the world, you have a biosphere reserve. These are some landscapes of the Greenbelt. As I said, the Biosphere Reserve encompasses a huge marine area. So we have marine ecosystems, marine and coastal ecosystems, beaches, a lot of forests, mangroves, agricultural areas. These agricultural areas used to be very important to the food supply of the metropolis. Today is not that important anymore. And of course, a huge city with all its problems and dilemmas, including fast and controlled growth. This is just to give you a flavor of some of our landscapes. This is the Serra do Mar State Park, which is the largest Atlantic forest park in the world. It's just by the city. This is the contrast from Cantareira State Park to the city. This is very common, having these sharp contrasts between forests and the city everywhere, all the time. Well, talking a little about land use and land cover in the Biosphere Reserve. Today, we have around 882,000 hectares. This is more or less half of the terrestrial territory of the Biosphere Reserve is covered by some kind of vegetation. And the red areas is where we lost vegetation in the period of from 85 to last year, 37 years period. And the darker green are the areas that were recovered in that period. And they are practically the same if you look here. You have a gap of just a net loss of just 4,000 hectares, which is not much, roughly 0.5%. So this brings us some messages. We have one bad news, two good news, and a challenge. The bad news is that we lost a lot of vegetation and we still keep losing it, especially in the fringes of the city. The good news is that we had an equivalent recovery of forests. And at the same time, we feel that there are many landowners that agree to let the forests grow in their lands, in spite of the high costs of those lands close to the metropolis. And the challenge is we have a half, we have another 50% to restore in order to make those ecosystems more healthy and more sustainable and more appropriate for biodiversity. Well, in terms of active restoration, this is a public data bank that when people are restoring, they go there and they register their projects. And these are some spots where there are these kinds of ecological restoration. All of them account for 2,500 hectares. That's too little compared to the overall restoration in the period I showed you. That means regeneration is a very important restoration factor in the Greenbelt of São Paulo. Well, we are building our climate action plan at this very moment. And it has many components. And the green component of the climate action plan is at the scale of the whole state of São Paulo. The Biosphere Reserve is just 7% of the state of São Paulo. For the whole state of São Paulo, we plan to restore 1.5 million hectares. 800,000 are mandatory restoration, as been mentioned, according to our forestry legislation. And 700,000 should be voluntary restoration. And especially for the voluntary restoration, there are many strategies to be put in place, to prioritize water-sensitive areas, to provide incentives to municipalities, to do robust payment for ecosystem services schemes, to work with technical advisory for not conventional types of restoration like multi-purpose forests, agroforestry, livestock forest integration, designation and consolidation of protected areas, and many other strategies. Well, in this sense, there's been a very good news for the state of São Paulo, which was the creation of the Biotas, that's the synthesis center for the state of São Paulo. We have two synthesis centers in Brazil, one for the whole Brazil, focused on ecosystem services, and this synthesis center for the state of São Paulo, focused on nature-based solutions. And this synthesis center is bringing together the academia, government people, and NGO so that all of them make joint solutions for climate change challenges we will face at the state level, including and especially restoration. Well, it's been very appropriately said this morning that restoration is not just about planting trees, is to involve a whole chain of things that should come together when you think of restoration. And this is a program, a project launched by the Biosphere Reserve Administration in '96, which was called the Youth Program, that used to implement a range of eco-job training centers spread around the Greenbelt to provide the disadvantaged youth with training opportunities in areas like ecotourism, restoration, sustainable agriculture, because it is very important that when we implement restoration processes, that these people come along with it. It should generate social inclusion. It should generate income, especially because in the fringe of the cities is where the biggest social exclusion pockets are. So it's no use thinking of a restoration if you don't think about how these people will benefit from it, not only indirectly, but with income, with proper income. And there have been excellent examples presented here today. Well, another very important action of the Biosphere Reserve is to provide the assessment of ecosystem services that has been done in the framework of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. The intention is to provide decision makers and policymakers with robust, with sound scientific information so that they can take more responsible actions on the management of their territories. And this resulted in this book. Unfortunately, it's in Portuguese. Some of you won't be able to read it. You can download it in the internet free, and this will be to the university library, and it will be here available if some of you would like to check it. Just to mention how ecosystem services are critical to the survivability of the city, I will mention two of them, which is water. Practically all of the water supplying São Paulo and Santos metropolises are produced in the own Greenbelt, nearly 95%. So the Greenbelt is a critical water security area. If you compromise the Greenbelt, you're compromising simply the water supply of the fourth biggest metropolis in the world. We have had a very important water shortage between 2013 2015, and we had the real risk of water collapse, water supply collapse. So this is very critical for us to know where the water is and how to protect the water basins. And 70% of the overall water volume is associated with protected areas. Another important issue is climate regulation. Making ecosystems resilient is important anywhere in the world. In cities, this is just much more critical because you have two overlapping effects of the global climate change and local climate change. They are operating together. Just for you to have a notion, in the last 80 years, the average temperature in the city of São Paulo raised by 2 degrees Celsius, and the humidity decreased by 7%. The temperature differences between the built-up areas and the green areas can be up to 20 degrees Celsius in terms of surface temperature, and up to 10 degrees Celsius in terms of air temperature. That's a lot. The city of Guarulhos, just close to São Paulo, implemented in 2009, and very important, 2008 actually, a very important project that is the Green Islands project. That's a very important example, a local example of a city doing a program based in ecosystem services. By that time, we didn't even say nature-based solutions, but they identified, they analyzed the hottest spots in the city, and they are channeling restoration to those hottest points so that the city can be cooler. This is an integrated map of the ecosystem services in the Greenbelt of São Paulo. We analyzed, I think, 14 ecosystem services, and this is where the intensity of the provision of these services. The green areas are where they are a higher capacity of ecosystem service provision, and the red ones are areas with very little capacity to provide ecosystem services. Another very important action of the Biosphere Reserve has been looking into new protected areas that could be designated and to enhance the green infrastructure around the metropolis of São Paulo. This is an example of a project led by, run by the Biosphere Reserve, which resulted in the designation of 2 big state parks of 28,000 hectares, part of it inside the metropolitan area of São Paulo, which is quite an achievement. Well, this is a map produced by this very university, coordinated by Richard Weller, which tried to analyze how big cities in biodiversity hotspots could threaten biodiversity until 2030. And in the case of São Paulo, they modeled how urban sprawl would be conflicting and placing a lot of pressure over sensitive green areas and protected areas in the Greenbelt. And we have 3 big challenges concerning the green areas of the Greenbelt. First of all is to mitigate the urbanization-driven deforestation. This is paramount for us. Second, to implement sound restoration efforts in the Greenbelt. And we are very optimistic that this could happen at a very good and fast scale. And third, it's much easier to restore the Greenbelt of São Paulo, where you have more peri-urban and rural areas. But inside the city, the pattern of the cities there in São Paulo metro area, they are very arid cities, little green inside the cities. So one of the biggest challenges is to bring the green back to inside the city, so that we have more ecosystem services operating inside the city, which we almost completely lost. And in conclusion, I leave you with 3 reflections. That São Paulo Greenbelt is the ultimate source of urban and peri-urban biodiversity and ecosystem services for 2 big metropolises. And I didn't even talk about the expressivity of biodiversity in the Greenbelt was huge. Ecosystem conservation and restoration is critical for us, and we should pursue it very, very hardly for many ecosystem services, especially water supply and resilience to climate change. And last but not least, one very important thing was that the Greenbelt be adopted as an integrated land management framework to channelize and to potentialize different public and private policies within its territory. Well, that's it. I thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. We have finally reached our last speaker, Mr. Hexing Chang. Hexing Chang is the director of the 3rd branch in Turenscape. focusing on planning, design of sponge cities, and ecological infrastructure. He hosted and participated in various cross-scale projects of regional ecological planning, master plan, urban design, and landscape design. His bio is quite short, but his contributions are very large. Give him a round of applause.
Thank you. And as you can see, I feel nervous now because a few years ago, I applied a PhD program in this university and got no response. And now you can see I'm invited to speak here, so you will never know what will happen in the future. And after I came to the school, I see Rob and Claire, Sophia, and everyone, I see how they organize all the program, and everyone is excellent. So I respect the result a few years ago you make. Okay, I will start. The topic I'm going to talk about is sponge city and sponge planet. Apparently, I'm working in Turenscape now after declined by the university. Yeah, Turenscape's vision and action. So in China, we're not only facing the challenge from landscape change, climate change, but also suffering flood, drought, pollution, and habitat loss. And we usually use conventional solutions like green infrastructure. It's strong and sophisticated, like damming, channelizing, flood walls, and sewage plants. But in Turenscape, we say green infrastructure can be necessary to solve urgent individual problems, but consuming huge energy and destroy the relationship between nature and the people, and destroy the resiliency of nature. So we tried to find an alternative way because we think a green infrastructure is based on the industrial technology. It's effective, but have side effects on the ecosystem. So we try to use nature-based ecological infrastructure, which is important for secure the ecosystem services, and kind of combine with the green infrastructure. And in the ecological infrastructure, water is the key. So we try to build a model. It's called a sponge city. It's a city built on the water center ecological infrastructure, and it has a systematic structure from the upstream to the middle stream and to the downstream of the land. And the philosophy is to retain water, slow down water in the middle stream, and be adaptive to the water in the downstream. And here I will give a brief talk about the development of the sponge city theory in China. Kong Jianyu and his team began to focus on water issues in 1997. And in 2000, at that time, we do not have a concept of a sponge city or something like that, but we have already tried to design and build green sponge system, wetland, and also living cells in this park. Is called Beijing Zhongguancun Life Science Park. And it's kind of the earliest try in China about the sponge city concept. And then in 2001, we finished the design and built in Zhongshan Qijiang Park with a resilient adaptive riverbank. And in 2002, during the ecological restoration of Yongning River, we tried to persuade the mayor of the city to demolished the concrete flood wall and recover it into a more flood-friendly and ecological riverbank. It's not easy to convince the mayor of the city, and especially it's almost 20 years ago in China. And in 2003, Cohn and his colleague write a book called The Letter to the Mayor of China. And this is a Chinese version in 2003, and recent years is translated into English version. And we use the concept of sponge as a metaphor for the flood migration and migration and the ability of nature system. And during around 2004, ecological infrastructure approach to solve water problem, applying in planning in Beijing, Taizhou, Weihai, Heze, some city in China. And in 2005, Tianjin Qiaoyuan wetland system has been designed and built for like a sponge city bubble in the park. And also Qinhuangdao coastline, coastal landscape, we use the same kind of prototype to retain water from both the seaside and the land. In 2006, the proposal of establishing a national ecological security pattern has been received by the Prime Minister of China, and here's Wen Jiabao, the Prime Minister in that year, and he write a letter to us and ask someone to read this proposal and maybe take some action at that time. And someone find us, and we do the research about the national ecological security pattern and also the pattern for the Beijing, the capital city of China. And in 2009, we designed and built Harbin Qunli Park. It's one of the earliest rainwater wetland park in China to solve the urban waterlogging. It's in the middle of the new city in Harbin. And here's a key point for the whole things. After series flood in Beijing in 2012, there is for maybe one night or two nights, 79 people died about the waterlogging in Beijing. So after that, Cohn wrote a letter to the top leader of the city and also the central government, claiming that sponge city or ecological infrastructure may be the solution to this kind of disaster. And the same year, ASLA Excellent Award was represented to the Turenscape of the Qunli Storm Water Park, and this news has been broadcast with a long interview with Cohn and Turenscape, how we work and what we want to do, and in the golden time in the evening of the Chinese television. And in 2013, President Xi Jinping officially endorsed the Sponge City concept at the Central Government Urbanization Conference. And this is the first time that the Sponge City concept mentioned by the central government officially. And Cohn has invited as an expert to participate in the drafting of the central government urbanization report. And the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development issued a set of technical guidelines about low-impact development. And in 2015, there is 16 cities has been issued to be pilot program to prove out the concept. And the year after that, there will be another 14 cities. And in 2017, Sponge City was included in the report of the work of government for the first time and became one of the key tasks of Chinese government. So after that, a lot of Sponge City project and practice carry on. And during that time, Kong Jian and his team continue to research, practice, advocate, and participate in the policy making. But at the early stage of the practice, most people or government they are caring about the LED technology, and they use a lot of energy solution, green infrastructure. They think that that's Spawn City concept means, but actually, the concept of Spawn City is more capable than conventional gray infrastructure because it's a more systematic way to think about the urban and rural region. And the core of the Spawn City theory lies in the construction of hydro-ecological infrastructure, which are informed by ecosystem services across scales. And also, we are inspired by the ancient wisdom of farming and water management. You can see the terrace, farming land, and also irrigation, fertilizing, growing, harvest. All this stuff took place in ancient China. And inspired by this, we conclude a few prototype, terracing, ponding, diking, and islanding. And we upgrade and try to learn from that. And then we develop replicable models that could be used to solve climate change problem and flood and pollution at a massive scale in an inexpensive way. And we have tested and built over 500 projects in 200 cities all over the world, but most of them is in China. And there is few projects that could represent what we think. The first is at the upstream, we try to regulate the water, the storm water, and absorb water, because over 65% of the Chinese cities suffer from urban flood. And here's the project. We try to retain water in the city so that we can mitigate the pressure for the downstream of the, and this is an example. In Nanchang, it suffered flood and waterlogging during the monsoon season every year. And here is a badly abused site. It used to be a dumping area for the coal ash, and we transfer it into vivid landscape. Here's a master plan, and we calculate different water level before the rainfall, after the rainfall, during the rainfall, to test the water level. And in just 3 years, with a very low budget, this abandoned fish farm has been changed into this. And this is what it looks like in fall. And you can see it's not just nature, it's people can walk in, and there is a lot of greenway sidewalks inside, and a platform to stop, boardwalks. And the visitors of all the age can come, and they are very enjoy it. And you can see not just people, You can see the bird in the sky of the picture in this photo. And also there's a lot of there's a lot of bridge because we have a lot of islands. The island, some of the islands you can use the bridge to get, but some of the island is leave for the bird, so people cannot touch. But you can use the bridge to get close and see what happened in the island. And another project is in Sanya city. It's also inspired by the ancient wisdom. We use terracing, ponding, and islanding as prototypes. It's a kind of combined project in this park. And creating habitat and both habitat and public space. Here's a rendering of what we want to do. You can see the terrace, the ponding. They can purify the water from the urban side. And in the ponding, there is a lot of islands that with trees and vegetations, they can kind of absorb the nutrients in the water. And here's under the construction and finished. Also boardwalk, island. Vegetation is great there. And also we have bridge, skywalks for people to view the whole park. And this is before the construction, after. It's the same view. And we also test the water retaining ability of this park. This is before. This is after. You can see there is not that flood risk around the park. And also Banjakit Forest Park in Thailand. It's a gift for the Queen of Thailand. And in this project, it used to be a factory, and they have low budget, but very tight schedule for this gift. I don't know why they give the gift so harsh, harsh to the Queen of the country, but yeah, that's what's happening. And we just use very simple engineering method, just cut and fill. And the army, in fact, the army built all this park because it's during the COVID-19 of the country. So they use army to build, and it's very fast, finished in only 1 year. And we contain some stormwater park in the project, and also islanding to use the plants and the vegetation to purify the water, and also retaining the rainfall during the monsoon seasons. And people can come. And what I just talked about is the upstream of the city or region. And in the middle stream, we try to slow down the water flow and take flood as an example. Take flood as friends. This is Yongning River I just mentioned. This is what it looks like before we designed. We persuade the mayor to break the flood wall and transform the riverbank to the ecological riverbank. And also in Yanweizhou, we break down all the water flood wall and change to the resilient riverbank. And this park is floodable and adaptive to the water. This is what it looks like in a 100-year flood and 20-year flood. Even in 100-year flood, you can still walk through the bridge to see the park, what's happening in park and in city. And in its 20 years flood, you can use most part of the park. And finally, when we went to the downstream of the city or the region, we try to adaptation at the end. This example shows how we build resiliency against the ocean surge. It's also in Sanya city. And the key challenge is to find an efficient and inexpensive way to reestablish the mangrove and also containing more water and be adaptive to the water. And we just break down all the flood wall, concrete flood wall, and use the concrete to the base of this kind of structure. It's a finger-like structure. With this structure, the water and the land can touch each other with much more area, and so the mangroves can effectively grow up, and also it contains more water. In just 3 years, the lifeless land has been transformed this. And this is another project in Haikou. It's also in the province of the Sanya city. And we try to transform all the infrastructure of the river. And as you can see, the terrace, purified water, and also it's a place for people. And we also do some post-occupation evaluation of this park. As you can see, there's the nutrients of the removal effect of all the nutrients. And we also create a habitat in this dense city center park. I will be speed up. And what I'm just talking about is not just about a river. I'm talking about the whole infrastructure. And there's the ecological infrastructure could across skills. And here shows the national ecological infrastructure. Maybe you think this is kind of MAG project I'm going to talk about, but we take MAG as a systematic with not just huge or big, but it's more systematic and across skills in different level. And we analyze the flood security pattern and soil and water conservation, biodiversity conservation. And then we combine many of these layers into the national ecological security pattern. Based on this, we develop a few strategy, and one of this strategy is foothills strategy, where we try to find where to build another 500 cities or towns for 0.5 billion new immigrants at that time. And we gave this proposal to the Prime Minister, as I said before, and for state regulation has been issued by the central government, and we wrote books. And we also talked to the minister and the mayors over 1,000 times. And in religion skill, I will take Guangzhou smart city planning as an example quickly. Also, we identify the 3 stages of the whole system and the 7 types of elements construct a regional scale smart city system. In this page, you can see from the comprehensive water ecological infrastructure pattern to the pattern of hydroecological infrastructure, and then to the structure of the whole smart city system. After that, we are also asked to finish a district scale project. It's also in Guangzhou. It's called Tianhe Smart district smart city system zoning, and there's a rendering. After that, we also be asked for a small micro-scale, project-scale corridor. It's called Daguan Wetland Corridor. And this shows the landscape transformation through design and engineering. This is before. And this is a rendering of the design. And this is what look after. You can see it's almost the same. And it's simply ponding, but it has ecological function of the area. And the boardwalks. People celebrate wedding here. So more than ever, we have to rethink the way we build our cities, the way we treat water and nature, and even the way we define civilization. And also, sponge city and the sponge system is a holistic and nature-based solution to protect and restore ecological infrastructure and make wise use of nature services for the benefit of the planet and the welfare of people. And while politics negotiation something in the UN climate conference in Egypt, controversially saying that we think a landscape planner or landscape designer should think like a king. This is one of the king in Asia, China, that Tony mentioned this morning. Yeah, and it's King Yu the Great who had the vision of healing the earth and living with nature, and he dealt with a flood in the ancient China and saved a lot of people's life. And I think we should act like a peasant who are able to transform the global surface down to the earth in an maybe in an inexpensive way and efficient way. Beyond that, I think, in fact, as landscape architecture, we should convince the king. Because I don't think most of us can be the king, really. But we need to learn to convince the king and tell them what is the right things to do. And that's all. Thank you.
Can I have the panelists one more time? And the speakers. So I think Catherine and Fritz have just said that Hexing, they're going to reconsider. But you have to go back. You have to go back to be, you know, square one. We have to do it all the way from the beginning again. Can you do that? Yeah. Okay. So everyone, you know the routine.
I go first?
Yes.
All right. So, great presentations. Thank you all. On the sponge cities, I was curious about the ramifications of some of the sites that looked like they had industrial waste or they were brownfields that you created these sponge landscapes over top, and whether they were remediated or whether those polluted soils were removed or covered over. And besides nutrients that you looked at from a water quality perspective, were there other water quality parameters that you also monitored over a period of time? And in terms of biodiversity, how did you, and the plant cover, what types of restoration strategies did you use to select the plant materials and measure the biodiversity there too? That was a lot.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's a lot because
Just take part of that.
yeah. I need to think a little while because I'm refused by this university. So I think it's based on the site we do in the project. And in different sites, we analyze what needs to be done. And we do a lot of research of that. And we also collaborate with Peking University, which is a city I graduated a few years ago, and it's a nearby city. It's a nearby university to the Turenscape. And what's the question?
Just so, for instance, like the soils that were contaminated, was any remediation or anything done to those soils before you put the sponge landscape on top of them?
You mean the analysis of the soil?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We have collaboration with a lot of laboratory of the country and also the local research laboratory. Yeah. So we do the research for that.
Yeah, and what kinds of techniques were used to either remove the pollutants from those soils or cover them over?
It's hard to deal with brownfield, but I think I don't know the details of the project, the project, but actually, usually we use the water-centered method to solve the problem, and if it's too difficult to use the water-centered method to solve the problem, we will try to find another way. Maybe it's not a green infrastructure way or the way that I mentioned. Maybe it's more engineering style, yeah, to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Emmanuelle?
So for Rodrigo, we often receive at IUCN, at the Commission on Ecosystem Management, where we're working on standards on NBS and all kind of guidance and so on. We often receive questions as to what are the actual benefits of nature-based solutions intervention. If you can really prove that that you're getting the benefits that you are planning when you start designing the project. So, I mean, you mentioned something about the report on ecosystem services provision, right? And to me, this is kind of showing, what are the ecosystem services that are restored, I assumed, ecosystem services provision that are restored, or to how much they are providing more like the increased provision. But I was wondering if there is any other ways that you're reporting on, the benefits of this intervention, and to prove like the actual benefits of the whole initiative, the whole project.
Well,
and if it's convincing also, like this report on ecosystem services, is it really convincing policymakers?
okay. I think that the concept of nature-based solutions for us is quite new. Some of the big cities in Brazil and in São Paulo are just starting to implement some of the infrastructure inside the cities, like the green wallets and other devices. I think we don't yet have data to tell about the efficiency of those NBSs inside the cities. In the case of the ecosystem service assessment, we focused much more in terms of the Greenbelt itself, the large green infrastructure and the big parks extensions. And we do have many important roles to report, and the book is full of them. But even inside the city, I would pick two examples. One of them is what I already mentioned in the city of Guarulhos, that they had some interventions that could put the temperature down. We don't yet have data on impacts on human health, on the health system. Well, we have some data, but not based on NBS interventions. We do have data, for example, metadata on cardiorespiratory health of the inhabitants of São Paulo, depending on the place where they live, if they live closer to greener areas or not. And another good example inside the city of São Paulo was the measurement of the decrease in air pollution. There were measurements in a few parks inside São Paulo, and they are proved to decrease air pollutions, and something like 7 chemical elements were tested, and there was decrease of air pollutions for all these chemical elements. But we do have a lot of important data on how the ecosystem services provided by the Greenbelt are vital for the function of the city. Well, this is one thing. To get the data, we did get the data, but I'm sure that we should take more time in reporting the results and making the results more understandable on the ground to policymakers. This is something that we hadn't done yet, and it's very important. But we have a few examples where there have been some small changes in public policies due to ecosystem data and information.
David, how many can you?
I know.
Just one now.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know. Okay. I'll go with a quick, fun one then. You know, this isn't really my space, but I love hearing about this stuff. This is fascinating to me, how all of this plays out in an urban area. I guess one, the material used in the buildings themselves. Is anybody sort of exploring that piece of this sort of urban space puzzle, the building materials themselves and the gray infrastructure? And then 2, to Hexing, where did you get all those big mature trees for this thing to happen so quickly?
The second question is about where to get the project.
The trees themselves.
The trees?
Yeah.
You mean
that all happened? Those things grew.
You mean the trees that we planted? I have never thought that was a question. In China, yeah, there's a lot of I don't know the English, but a lot of garden that plant trees for the infrastructure in China. I think in these 50 years, I don't think it's a problem to get the trees. Yeah.
Interesting.
Is it a problem here?
Oh, we usually plant small trees here.
Yeah.
Big girl.
And but it's difficult to convince the maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's a problem to convince the mayor or the decision maker of the city to do not use some trees from North America or big trees from countryside. Just use trees that based on the environment where you live in, because there is a period, not now, but there is a period that the decision maker, some of the decision maker, they like the trees from all over the world. So, but now it's not a problem because the country, I think, issued the regulation that every place you just choose the plants and vegetations get used to the environmental you based on. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Kyra?
So my question was actually about ecosystem services too, but I think we've covered that. I was just wondering, being in urban areas, are there any specific species or habitats that your projects are looking to support other than humans? Because I feel with these projects, we get the most impact from them. So any other species or habitats within the areas?
In our case, I don't think that there is focus on a single ecosystem or species. I think we have a more overall view on restoration and the restoration targets. But the Greenbelt of São Paulo stands just in the transition from the more humid tropical forest, is in the transition from the coastal forests to the more inland forests. And in the case of the state of São Paulo and other parts of Brazil, then actually the inland forests have been more severely deforested. So there should be some emphasis and priority put on them. If you look at the scale of the Greenbelt, we don't reach these inland forests of the state of São Paulo that we should focus on, recuperate. They were the savannas of the state of São Paulo. We have a lot of savannas in São Paulo. They are very rich in terms of biodiversity. We have left just around 1% of the regional cover of the Cerrado, the savanna. So this is really a matter of interest and priority to us. But that doesn't occur very much in the Greenbelt. So in the Greenbelt, I think there are other aspects that drive the recovery of areas other than species types and ecosystem types and phytophysiognomy types.
Now let's think about it. Over the course of the day, and thank you all audience for sticking with us the whole day, conservation happens across all lands and seas. It happens on wildlands, it happens in rural lands, it happens in urban lands. We've witnessed examples of people who not only are dreaming big, but doing big in all these contexts. I just want to say thanks to the panelists who've come up with great questions to ask, to all the speakers who've really shared great visionary and actionable thinking with us. And I also want to just thank the University of Pennsylvania. I went to school here, and I never thought that this university, when I went to school here, would tackle such complex and big problems that are essentially going to change the world. Now, I'm based at Cornell, and Cornellians would joke about people from Penn, and they go, "Oh, you're a Penn-wee." And I go, "What's a Penn-wee?" You know, when people from Penn go, "At Penn, we change the world." Thank you.
This was a very long and ambitious day to have 10 projects speak and present their lives' work over 15 minutes. Clara Sophia is here finally, so let's give her a round of applause for all the great work that she did. I'm going to invite Matthijs Bouw to the stage next, who's going to summarize the day. Good luck, in 15 minutes or less. Matthijs Bouw is the Dutch founder of One Architecture and Urbanism, an award-winning Amsterdam and New York-based firm. One is a global leader in the use of design to conceive and advance climate adaptation and mitigation projects, including Manhattan's coastal protection and many mega eco projects from around the world. At the Weizmann School of Design, he directs the Urban Resilience Certificate Program, is a professor of practice, the McHarg Center Fellow for Risk and Resilience, and a fellow at the Institute of Urban Research. He is the co-editor of Building with Nature, Creating, Implementing, and Upscaling Nature-Based Solutions. Matthijs Bouw.
Thank you, Robert. And that mega eco was not in my bio, but it's an interesting term, and I really love to hear after today if this is something that we find workable and that can help this community of practice that I see developing here. So I need to get you out of here by 6. And so I'll try and do that. I wrote 20 pages of notes. I'm not going to go through my notes. Also, we've seen these presentations of people who in 15 minutes had been talking about what is their life's work. And so it will be so impolite to take more time than they do. Um, um, and not even the people that have been presenting here, right? It's all these partners that people have been mentioning in those projects that I hope will become and are already part of this community of practice. In one of the panels, people talked about a failed success, and I'm really happy with all the notes that I could take, and also all the notes that I could take about all the failures that are part of doing this work, because that's how we learn. And I really find it admirable that people are able to present all the difficulties and all the challenges and all the failures that come with these projects. And so I would like to thank them for that as well. And even if it's a failed success, it's also the scale at which we need to be working in our current world. We need to understand that we're still building a ton of infrastructure, 98% of which is not climate adaptive in the way that it responds to the challenges that it will encounter during its lifetime. Land use patterns are continuing to go in the wrong direction. And there's hope here today. There's hope from Sao Paulo, who showed that maybe there that degradation can be stopped. But it is we need to be working at this scale. So that's why I really feel also that this mega eco as a term and as a community and as a conversation really deserves a place. And I'd really like to thank Robert and Richard for coming up with it, and also Fritz for framing it within the context of mega regions, mega projects, and all the pitfalls that might also come with that. Tony Hiss spoke about the Continental Congress as a comparison. I think we modestly start with a community of practice in which we hope to increase, even bringing philanthropic partners in. And so what I'd like to do today in the 10 minutes that I have left is to sort of give you some of the observations that I have from today that I find interesting, and that I hope that this community will continue talking about and discussing and exploring, and that will start with a workshop or a roundtable that with the panelists and the speakers will have tomorrow morning. One of the things that really I found intriguing is how many of these mega eco projects that have been described today have really benefited from a strong institutional embedding. Government at some moment has picked up the call and said, let's go and do this. And that is really, I feel, important and perhaps critical to the success. But what also was equally critical to the success, that maybe this institutional embedding is important, but mega eco happens locally. It is about local actions and having the local stakeholders be part of the decision making and of the actual work. So think like a king and act like a peasant is, I think, really good. Mega eco is small. Many small make mega, and so this grassroots component, I think, is strong. But then again, there is something that makes mega. What we hope is that these projects will also start having repercussions and impacts that go beyond the scale of the projects themselves, beyond the territory of the projects themselves, right? And that's another thing that we learned is maybe some people we start with planting, but that's not really, or maybe we start with not allowing further developments and conserving lands. But what we are really starting to explore is like planting in itself is problematic. We've seen many examples of planting going horribly wrong. In these projects, it's suggested that it hasn't gone horribly wrong. We're going to talk a bit more about that tomorrow, if that's actually the case, because it can go horribly wrong, because these plantations often create monocultures. Natalie Seddon from the Oxford Center of Nature-Based Solutions has written very eloquently about that, and has really said that if you want to move from planting to ecosystem restorations and to having positive benefits at scale, you need to involve, engage the complexity, involve the locals, and so I think that is something that is really, really important. And I think figuring out how we can have impact beyond the specific sites of a project, impact that is really systemic, is really of interest to me. If I looked at the way people have been talking about metrics, those metrics, like where does it sort of go above and beyond itself, have not been really discussed, but we should think about that. And then we should also think about what is the baseline and how can we establish baselines of impact in a rapidly changing climate. And so maybe that's something to talk about as well. There's been a conversation about managing expectations of impacts, knowing that things take time. These projects take time. But we have very little time, but we're also in an era where much of our environment is being degraded or becoming more riskier or unbearable because of a changing climate. So that's something I hope that we can talk about in our roundtable tomorrow. Another thing that I really found wonderful is the thread on education and on how we can learn and see in different ways, how we can know in different ways. Catherine started it off with talking about indigenous lands and indigenous land practices. There is, of course, people acknowledge that there is maybe Western ways of knowing and indigenous ways of knowing and seeing, and both are valuable, but I also see a lot of opportunity for South-South learning in this conversation, and I really hope that is something that can continue here between continents. What I also found interesting is like there was a sort of like a sort of sliding way in which we talked about the economic impacts, and in a way the first panel talked mostly about conservation, about how important conservation and limited restoration is to restoring connectivity. But as we progressed, we started to change in a way, there was a sort of shift from conservation to what we in the Netherlands call building with nature. I thought that was interesting. With that, of course, come economic models that are starting to change. We talked about ecosystem services. I found that very inspiring. I found it both worrisome, and it made me happy that we did not talk too much about all the carbon sequestration projects and the problems of offset projects in relation to mega eco, but we need to go there at some moment. But what people said here is these impacts and economic impacts need to fall locally. That is what is important. That's what's going to sustain this. And I thought that was a real eye-opener. Like, how can we develop, and there are fantastic models within the Great Green Wall, but also in other projects that show like we really need to invest along the entire value chain, how we can make sure that economic benefits and ecosystem services find themselves or benefit the local population who needs to buy into this, and not only buy into this, they need to have the agency to shape these projects. Although I did have some questions about that, the notion of local population is not only species migrate, and they start to migrate maybe more because of climate, also people migrate. And so one of the conversations that we're going to have is that in an increasingly mobile society, how do we deal with the fact that communities, the communities that we work for, are not stable. They can be more fluid. And with that, having these long-term conversations and starting to see the benefits and getting the buy-in and the stewardship and all that stuff just might become more difficult. And that's something that we need to be aware of. Climate change is at the background of this. Safeguarding what we do invest in is therefore, someone said, really, really important, because these environments that we are conserving or building with nature are under stress and are going to be increasingly under stress. So adaptive management and safeguarding is really important. Some final points. Water seems to be a huge issue in relation to this to this work. I think that can be a sort of a specific sort of subgroup of our Continental Congress on Mega Eco that really focuses on the intersections between water and Mega Eco. I thought it was interesting in talking about scale in the last presentation that whereas this grizzlies need sort of contiguous landscapes, birds don't need to have that. So you can maybe make Mega Eco, and I know there's a project that the Asian Development Bank is developing, which is called the, I think, Asian Flyway, which goes from Kamchatka to Indonesia, which is basically restoring a lot of places along those flyways as a Mega Eco project. So contiguity is maybe an issue, and then I think lastly, because we have only a few minutes left, is I was very happy. We're at the design school here. We organize this conference here because it fits very much with the history of this school. It fits very much with the work that is still going on at this school. Weller's work, Robert's work, but also the work of a lot of other people. And we are wondering, if we invite you all here, is like what can we talk about design in this context? We feel at this school that we need to do this work because this is where the questions are, and we don't want to be a school that designs only parks and public spaces. We want to work at this scale, and I was very happy to sort of see design play a role in, and to start imagining what role we can have as designers. Critical in today was the fact that you cannot unthink Mega Eco without human systems and without human interactions. That was really, if there's one big takeaway, that's the one big takeaway. And I really feel that design can play a role in navigating that. In the last examples, also in making that exciting and beautiful in places that people want to visit, even though I'm not sure if I would like to live in a country where it's permanently autumn. But for the rest, I really feel that intersection between the human and the natural, which is really at the essence of what landscape architecture and landscape design is. I felt that very much. With that come images, and some of the language that has been used has been fantastic today. In the way Mega Eco projects have been labeled, Yellowstone to Yukon is a fantastic example, but I think there's also a visual language that we can help with. But more fundamentally, I thought that there was a conversation about we are living in dynamic environments with a lot of uncertainty, and with that belong thinking about long-term futures, about adaptive pathways and scenarios to get there. And I feel also that at that scale, we can play a role. So I'm not talking for the school. I think that's maybe for others, but I do know, knowing this school really, really well, that we are very excited about what happened today, and there's a lot of people in this school who really feel that with the tools that we can bring in this school, we can bring something to this conversation. We want to learn from you all, and we want to be part of this conversation. It's 6 o'clock. It's been a long day. Thank you so much for being here, and to be continued.